Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever just, stopped and wondered how seemingly rational people, smart people, get swept up in things that, while looking back, seem completely wild?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking market frenzies, social crazes.
Right, all sorts of things. How does a whole crowd, individuals, just seem to lose their grip on common sense all at once?
It's a question that echoes through history, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the core puzzle tackled in a book from, nearly 200 years ago now. But it feels incredibly relevant, almost urgent today.
Yeah, definitely. So today we're doing what we call an intellectual autopsy on Charles Mackay's 1841 classic, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. We've got loads of material here, analyses, bits from the book itself, modern takes.
Right.
And our mission really is to pull out the key insights, understand what Mackay was getting at, and crucially, see how it maps onto the world you navigate right now.
And it's important to remember he wasn't just talking finance, was he?
Not at all. He looked at witch hunts, alchemy, the Crusades. He saw this pattern, this quote-unquote madness popping up everywhere.
Which is why it has such staying power, I think.
Yeah.
The fact that people still read it. People like Bernard Baruch. Didn't he say it helped him dodge the 1929 crash?
He did, yeah. That tells you something. It taps into something really fundamental about us, about human behavior that just hasn't shifted much.
So, okay, let's dig in. What was the core problem Mackay saw? Why does this book still hit home today?
Well, he was really wrestling with this deep human vulnerability, wasn't he? Our tendency towards, emotional decisions, speculation that's completely unmoored from actual value.
And that massive pull of the herd, that allure.
Exactly. He saw how easily people, even whole communities, could just sort of abandon their critical thinking, their reason, when chasing some collective obsession.
His language.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly subtle.
No, that preface where he talks about whole communities suddenly fix their minds upon one object and go mad in its pursuit.
Millions of people become simultaneously impressed with one delusion.
Sober nations have all at once become desperate gamblers and risked almost their existence upon the turn of a piece of paper.
Wow. It really paints a picture. And remember, Mackay wasn't just some academic in a tower. He was a Scottish journalist, right? Watching his own time.
Yeah, he even added the railway mania, which was happening practically on his doorstep in the 1840s. He added that to later editions. He saw this madness having real, tangible, negative consequences.
Turning sober nations into desperate gamblers implies a fall, a loss of something rational.
And the costs he describes, they're huge. Financial ruin, obviously, but for the national manias, he talks about rivers of blood and a harvest of groans and tears. You can feel the moral judgment in words like folly, madness, delusions.
Yeah, he wasn't just collecting quirky stories. He saw himself as diagnosing a kind of recurring illness in society, rooted deep in human character. This collective susceptibility just washes over individual good sense.
Leading to these cycles, boom and bust, euphoria and collapse. Predictable, almost.
That's what he argued.
Okay, so let's try and boil it down. What's the absolute core thesis here?
I'd say it's this. We, as humans, are fundamentally vulnerable to collective delusions. Emotion and the herd instinct can, and often do, overwhelm individual reason. This leads to these predictable cycles of mania and then crash.
And the key takeaway is
recognizing that vulnerability in ourselves and the world around us. That's the essential first step. For intellectual self-defense, for financial self-preservation, whatever it is, you have to see the potential for it first.
Which brings us straight to that famous line, the one everyone quotes.
Ah, yes. Men, it has been well said, think in herds. It will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly and one by one.
That really captures it. The madness is collective, the recovery is solitary.
Exactly. And as one source points out, central to this is the idea that human nature itself is just, prone to folly, prone to being swayed by the crowd. There's a group psychology that can overpower individual logic.
It's a bit sobering, isn't it? This idea that we're kind of wired for this potential madness.
It is. But like you said, seeing it, diagnosing it, that's the start of building some kind of defense.
Okay, but for Mackay's whole argument to hold water, what does he have to assume about us, about history? What are the sort of unspoken beliefs underpinning his work?
Good question. Every big idea rests on some foundational assumptions, right? For Mackay, the first big one is what you might call the enduring flaw, basically. Human irrationality is a constant.
Meaning our susceptibility to greed, fear, following the crowd. That stuff doesn't really change over time.
He implicitly assumes it's relatively constant,
Yeah.
Predictable even. The objects of the delusion change tulips, railway stocks, maybe digital tokens today.
Right.
But the psychological engine driving the frenzy, that stays pretty much the same. Technology might change the speed, the way it spreads.
Like pouring gasoline on the fire, maybe?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fundamentally change our tendency towards it. His whole book, comparing manias across centuries, hinges on this idea of a consistent human element. Our sources back this up, saying he saw human nature as inherently prone to folly, and these things as recurring patterns.
It's like the stage setting changes, the costumes change, but the basic human drama, chasing easy money, fear of missing out, wanting to belong that script, is familiar. Mackay would recognize it today.
Absolutely. And if human nature is this constant, that leads straight to his second big assumption. History is a teacher.
Okay, so history isn't just, stuff that happened. It's useful.
For Mackay, definitely. He sees it as this incredible library of patterns, past mistakes, past follies. They're not just stories, they're diagnostic tools for the present.
So Tulip Mania, the South Sea bubble, they're not just weird historical footnotes, they're case studies.
Precisely. If human nature is constant, then the patterns of madness will recur. So studying past delusions gives you invaluable lessons for spotting similar things happening now. Our sources highlight this, saying his work helps reveal similar delusions today. Its power lies in its timelessness.
Connecting the dots between, say, 17th century tulips and maybe 20th century Beanie Babies or the 2008 housing crash.
Exactly. He aimed to illuminate the recurring patterns. The underlying belief is that studying history makes you a wiser, more discerning observer of your own time. You could potentially spot the signs.
Which leads to a kind of paradox, though, doesn't it? If history can teach us, why do these manias keep happening? It implies we're pretty bad students, collectively speaking.
That's the kicker, isn't it? History offers the lessons. But as a whole, humanity seems determined to repeat the class.
But that line again, recover their senses slowly and one by one. That suggests individuals can learn. The crowd might be doomed to repeat, but maybe the individual,
armed with this knowledge, can break the cycle. I think that's the implication. Maybe the book isn't meant to cure the crowd, but to be a survival guide for the individual within the crowd.
That's a fascinating distinction. The rush into madness is collective and quick. Getting your head straight is slow and solitary. It makes the work of thinking critically seem, lonely almost.
It suggests it requires deliberate, individual effort.
Okay, so let's accept this. We're vulnerable. History shows patterns. How does the madness actually work? What's the sort of mental operating system Mackay describes in his examples? What are the pillars of his logic?
Well, the absolute bedrock, the foundation, is the sheer contagiousness of it all. Collective folly spreads. Mackay shows over and over how individual reason, skepticism, even your own moral compass can get totally eroded when you're swept up in a crowd delusion.
Madness is infectious. That's the go mad in herds part.
Exactly. One analysis puts it well. Seemingly rational individuals can be swept up, abandoning critical thinking and succumbing to irrational exuberance. Once you're part of that herd, you start to act and react in similar and predictable ways. You lose your independent judgment.
It's like a psychological virus then. One person catches the fever, passes it on.
And it spreads until a whole group, maybe even a nation, is in this kind of shared delirium. Your own intellectual immune system gets compromised just by being around it. It's really hard to stand back and be skeptical when everyone you know is caught up.
And your sense of rationality gets twisted.
Totally warped. Normal risk calculations go out the window. Things that seem crazy in hindsight suddenly feel like the only sensible option, mainly because of that fear of missing out, FOMO.
That sober nations becoming desperate gamblers line nails it.
It does. Raw emotion, greed, fear, sheer excitement just takes over from careful thought.
Like with the tulips. A golden bait hung temptingly out. Rush to the tulip marts like flies around a honeypot. In that kind of atmosphere, not joining in feels irrational. The crowd's emotional logic takes over your own.
Creates its own distorted reality. A temporary suspension of disbelief, fueled by emotion and social pressure.
Okay, so folly is contagious. How does an outbreak typically play out according to Mackay? He gives us this anatomy through Tulip Mania, the Mississippi scheme, the South Sea bubble. What are the stages?
Right, he identifies this kind of recurring three-act structure. First up is what you could call the narrative seduction. Mackay called it the golden bait.
The hook, the thing that grabs people initially.
Exactly. Manias nearly always start with a really compelling story. Simple, attractive, easy to grasp. It promises amazing returns, often linked to something new, maybe revolutionary or exclusive.
Like the exotic beauty and status of rare tulips.
Or the promise of vast riches from Louisiana gold in the Mississippi scheme, or exclusive trading rights in the South Sea bubble. These stories are powerful.
And Mackay stressed how the story itself could completely overshadow the actual value, right? Using terms like golden bait or beguile the town with air and empty names.
Yeah, he hammered that point home.
Yeah.
It showed that assuming people are purely rational actors just doesn't work when these emotionally charged stories are flying around. They tap into basic human desires. Greed, hope, pride, wanting to be part of the next big thing. Healthy skepticism is often the first casualty.
So the story gets out there, starts to catch on. Then what?
Then comes stage 2. The social proof spiral. Mackay's madness of herds. As the narrative gains steam, and crucially, as early participants seem to be making money.
Which they do while the bubble's inflating.
Right. That's when social proof kicks in hard. You see your neighbors getting rich, you read about it everywhere, and this powerful urge builds you got to get in before it's too late.
Doubt gets pushed aside because, well, look at everyone else. The crowd must know something, right?
Exactly. Prices shoot up, which seems to prove the story right, which pulls in more people, which pushes prices higher. It's this intense self-feeding loop. Mackay's full of examples. Nobles, citizens, chimney sweeps, all trading tulips.
The hunchback renting his hump as a desk.
Yeah. People from every corner of society get sucked in. Men go mad in herds. It shows how easily our individual judgment gets swamped by what we perceive the group is doing. It's not just greed, it's that deep need for validation, for belonging.
These things feel completely unstoppable on the way up, but Mackay always brings us to the end game.
Always. Act 3, the inevitable unraveling, the reckoning. Because these manias are built on stories and speculation, detached from reality, eventually something gives.
A trigger.
Often, yeah. Maybe confidence wavers, maybe some external shock hits, maybe the supply of new money dries up. But the narrative shatters. The social proof evaporates, and the collapse. It's usually terrifyingly fast and brutal. Fear replaces greed, and it's a stampede for the exits.
His accounts of the crashes are really vivid. The tulip bubble bursting suddenly, confidence gone, market crashing, the Mississippi scheme imploding, the South Sea bubble ruining thousands.
He detailed these collapses deliberately. They're cautionary tales. They show the inherent unsustainability and act as a counter to that dangerous thought. This time is different. The same forces that inflate the bubble emotion speed accelerate the crash. The results are melancholy, as he put it.
And it's asymmetric, isn't it? Getting in is fueled by hope. Getting out is driven by panic. Panic is usually faster, more destructive.
Much more. And back to that crucial line. They only recover their senses slowly, and one by one. The learning, the disillusionment that happens individually, introspectively, slowly, unlike the mad rush into folly, which is fast and communal.
Which really does suggest that trying to wise up, to learn from this, it's an individual journey. You can't rely on the crowd to learn its lesson collectively before it's too late.
Seems to be his message, yeah. The work has to be done one by one.
Okay, so if we're potentially wired for this stuff, and history shows us the playbook, how does Mackay actually help us defend ourselves? What's the psychological armor he offers?
Well, the main defense he offers, implicitly, is skepticism. But specifically, skepticism fueled by knowing this history, by showing you the disastrous endings, by laying bare the mechanisms. He's trying to vaccinate you against the allure when the next shiny new thing comes along.
So the core lesson is, think for yourself. Detach emotionally.
Essentially, yes. Cultivate independent thought, emotional resilience, and the courage to stand apart, even if it feels weird or lonely, or like you're missing out in the short term.
Like the book is the vaccine, and the stories are weakened strains of the virus. Exposure builds immunity, a healthy, informed skepticism.
I like that analogy. And it's not passive cynicism, like just saying everything's a scam. It's active. It requires effort, learning the history, questioning the easy stories, resisting the social pressure. It's discipline. As one source said, the goal is to notice when this herd mentality occurs and then actively develop a different plan.
So not just shouting bubble, but asking, okay, how is this like Tulip Mania? How is it different? What are the mechanics here?
Exactly. The armor is that mental muscle you build through critical thinking, historical study, and being honest about your own potential biases and weaknesses. That recovery, slowly and one by one, suggests it's a deliberate process of building that strength.
All right, let's stress test these ideas. nearly 200 years old. How do they hold up in our world? With the internet, social media, instant global communication, algorithms. Does Mackay still apply? Where does it work? And maybe where does it fall short?
Oh, they absolutely apply. If anything, modern tech is like an accelerant. It speeds up the dynamics Mackay saw.
Okay, take the GameStop thing. Meme stocks a couple of years back. Can Mackay help us understand that?
Textbook Mackay, just wearing digital clothes. You had this incredibly potent, simple narrative. David versus Goliath, retail investors sticking it to Wall Street, slogans like "to the moon," "diamond hands," that's pure narrative seduction, amplified massively online.
And the social proof spiral.
Turbocharged. Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. Viral due diligence. It was mostly just confirmation bias and echo chambers. Huge social pressure to hodl, don't sell, no matter what the company's actual fundamentals were. It got very tribal, almost cult-like.
And completely detached from the underlying business.
Absolutely. A struggling video game retailer's stock price going stratospheric, based purely on hype, a short squeeze, and crowd momentum. Zero connection to intrinsic value. Classic speculative mania.
What about crypto bubbles? We've certainly seen a few of those waves roll through.
Same patterns, different assets. Powerful narratives. Check. Decentralized finance. Freedom from government control. Digital gold. Making fortunes overnight.
The tech itself, blockchain, can be part of the allure too, right? Kind of mysterious.
Definitely. It fits Mackay's observations sometimes. The more confusion, the better. If it's hard to understand, it's harder to definitively say it's not valuable, especially when the price is going up.
And the social proof. Media hype, celebrities, influencers, FOMO, number go up becomes the proof itself.
Exactly. And for many cryptocurrencies, there's a real debate about intrinsic value versus purely speculative value. Price driven by belief in future price increases rather than underlying utility. You hear skeptical views, like one source saying there's not a single rational economic reason. For some assets, they're worthless once the hype is ripped away. Strong words, but it reflects the kind of fundamental questioning Mackay encourages.
So technology doesn't make us immune, it just makes the madness faster, bigger.
Faster, wider reach, maybe more intense. Misinformation travels instantly. Echo chambers amplify the social proof like never before. It's the same human psychology, but the tools to exploit it are evolving incredibly quickly.
Old wine in new high-tech bottles.
Pretty much. You have to understand how it's happening today to even spot it.
But let's be critical, as Mackay would want us to be. Where does his model maybe not fit so well? Where is it too simple?
Yeah, acknowledging the limits is crucial. One big challenge is telling the difference between genuine world-changing innovation and pure speculative hype while it's happening. Mackay's brilliant at the autopsy after the crash.
Right.
But think about early automobiles, or the internet itself. Both had periods of wild speculation and hype. They probably looked a lot like bubbles in their early days.
So if you just applied Mackay's skepticism blanketly, you might dismiss the next big thing along with the froth. He doesn't give you a magic formula for telling them apart in real time.
No, he doesn't. Then there's the wisdom of crowds idea from people like James Surowiecki. The argument that under the right conditions, diverse opinions, independent thinking, good ways to gather judgments, crowds can actually be smarter than individuals.
So not all crowds are mad.
Exactly. Manias are what happens when those conditions break down, especially independence when everyone starts copying everyone else. That aligns with Mackay, actually.
Yeah.
But it's a useful nuance. Collective behavior isn't always folly. How the crowd works is key.
And we should also mention the historical accuracy debates, right? Especially around Tulip Mania.
Fair point. Some modern historians argue Mackay maybe relied on exaggerated or satirical accounts, puffing at the scale and impact. People like Anne Goldgar suggest the stories of mass ruin from tulips might be more myth than reality, that it involved fewer people and didn't crash the whole economy.
He might have sexed up the story, as one source put it.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
Now, does that totally invalidate his psychological points? Probably not. The dynamics he describes, narrative, social proof, detachment from value, still resonate and are seen in other documented manias. But it's a reminder not to take every historical detail as gospel. The power might be in the psychological truth, even if slightly embellished.
And then there's the final, deeply ironic limitation, the author himself.
Ah, yes, the ultimate twist. There's pretty good evidence that Charles Mackay, the guy who wrote the literal book on this stuff, got caught up in the railway mania himself, reportedly writing very optimistically about railway shares right near the peak.
No, the master diagnostician caught the disease.
Seems like it. Which doesn't make his insights wrong. If anything, it powerfully reinforces his main point.
That nobody is immune. Not even him.
Exactly. Even deep knowledge doesn't guarantee immunity. The pull of the crowd, the lure of the story, it's incredibly strong. Very humbling reminder for anyone reading his work.
So these limits show that while the why might be timeless, the how keeps changing. We need that vigilance, that critical thinking applied to today's world to spot the old patterns in their new disguises.
Absolutely. The core vulnerability gets exploited in new ways.
Okay, so we've dissected this thing, looked at its strengths, its limits, how it plays out today. What's the ultimate takeaway? How do we synthesize this into a practical tool for thinking about collective behavior?
I think what emerges is a kind of three-step mental framework. First, awareness. Really internalize your own susceptibility. Herd behavior, emotional contagion, seductive stories, accept you're vulnerable. Humility first.
Okay. Know thyself and thy weaknesses.
Second, pattern recognition. Use history. Use Mackay's examples. Learn the signs, the compelling story, the social proof building, the disconnect from reality, the eventual unraveling. Learn to spot the script.
Got it. Learn the patterns.
Third, discipline skepticism. This is about building resilience, independent thought, emotional control, questioning the consensus, grounding decisions in analysis, not just hype, having the guts to stand apart.
Build the armor. Awareness, pattern recognition, discipline, skepticism.
It's a powerful approach, and it applies way beyond finance, right? Politics, fads, social trends, anywhere emotion and groupthink can take over.
So if we had to distill it even further to one single mental tool inspired by Mackay, what would that be? Maybe the mania mirror.
The mania mirror. I like it. What is that?
It's like an ingrained habit. You see some big popular enthusiasm taking off and you consciously hold it up against Mackay's historical patterns. You ask yourself diagnostic questions. Like, okay, what parts of Tulip Mania or the South Sea bubble or the dot-com crash do I see mirrored here? Is there a super simple, emotionally appealing story drowning out the complexities or the risks? Is the main pressure to join coming from seeing everyone else do it from FOMO, from wanting to belong? How tied is this whole thing to actual facts, real utility, sustainable value versus just sentiment, momentum, speculation? Who's pushing this narrative the hardest and what's in it for them? And maybe most importantly, who's disagreeing and why is nobody listening to them?
Ah, I see. That's powerful. It forces you to step back, create some distance, become an analyst, not just part of the crowd.
Exactly. It uses history as a toolkit. It's an early warning system. Spot the symptoms before you catch the fever. And it keeps you humble, reminding you this time is different is usually famous last words when it comes to human psychology.
It pushes you towards that second level thinking people talk about. Beyond the surface reaction, asking the deeper, harder questions based on historical perspective. Resisting the emotional tide.
It's about keeping your head, basically. And maybe your shirt, too. Using that mania mirror to stay grounded when things get crazy.
A valuable tool indeed.
So, Charles Mackay's extraordinary popular delusions and the madness of crowds. It really is more than just history, isn't it? It's this timeless guide to human psychology, helping you navigate these powerful waves of collective belief and speculation that are always washing over us.
Yeah, the names change, the technology changes, tulips, railways, dot-coms, crypto, but the fundamental human drama Mackay described, reason versus emotion, the individual versus the herd, that struggle is constant.
His core warning feels as relevant as ever.
If not more so.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to chew on. In our world today, hyper-connected, information and misinformation spreading instantly. Is the potential infection rate for these collective delusions just permanently higher now? Faster, wider?
And if it is, what does that mean for your own personal vigilance? For relying on that slow, one-by-one recovery of your senses?
Something to think about.
Definitely.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.